Fate's Dance, Book 1 of Fate's Hybrid series, read by the author, Julie Rockwell. Chapter 1. Maybe I shouldn't have done what I did. There were things that I should have thought about, but at that moment, I didn't. Thinking back on it now, I could barely feel the hot cup of coffee that my hands were wrapped around, sitting in my usual spot in the rundown diner that I frequent. I needed some time to collect my thoughts and make sure that I wasn't being followed. My name is Danny. I'm 25 years old, and I belong to a group that hunted things that roamed in the dark. Things that would rip you apart if given the chance. The only thing different tonight was that I let a man go instead of killing him. I knew he was a vampire, but that wasn't the issue. I had no problems putting a wooden stake into a vampire and setting them on fire. Except this one. This one I somehow knew. This man I had dreamt about since I was a young girl. I would hear his voice calling out to me once I turned 18. I kept my dreams and my night terrors to myself until one day I went to see someone about them. It was getting to the point where I was fired from my job for falling asleep. I felt safe enough during the day, and I would pass out quickly. Only thing is, my bosses didn't like that. For the past year, I had been fired 6 times from 6 different jobs. After seeing someone about my issues, she set me up with a company that worked at night doing security. After 2 years at this job, a man came up to me and handed me a card. I called the number on it and had a meeting with someone named Tom. The next morning, I met up with him at my usual diner. That is where he told me all about his organization. My therapist was a part of this organization. I spent some time talking with both of them, and afterwards I decided to join. They hunted down the monsters that roam the nights. For a year, everything was going great. I could finally get reprieve for all the horrors that would terrorize me as I was growing up. I followed this man a few blocks. With it being November, I had no problem blending in, wearing dark clothes and a hat that I could pull down low enough not to be recognized. I ended up losing him after a few blocks. I leaned against the wall of an old building, gathering my thoughts. I had never lost anyone before, and this is what threw me for a loop. I messed up somehow, and I needed to figure out where I went wrong. That was my mistake, letting my guard down, and as I leaned against the wall, I closed my eyes and lifted my head up to the sky, letting the snowflakes fall upon my face. I see you have finally found a way to put your skills to use, a man's voice whispered next to my ear. Every fiber of my body froze at that voice. My eyes flew open, and I turned slightly to see a man towering over me. His eyes were the lightest of blue, and he had short brown hair that looked like it was recently cut. He wore a dark suit that fit just right on certain parts of his body. I could see he was muscular, but not overly done. All I could do was blink a few times, and I tried to swallow the lump that was stuck in my throat. His smile revealed 2 sharp points. "You," was all I could get out since my throat had dried up. This was the man for my nightmares growing up. "I see you have grown into a fine woman, Danny. I have watched you over the years. But this job that you have now? Such a shame," he said as his one finger traced the side of my face. I knew at that moment that he was either going to kill me or turn me. I had messed up majorly, and I now had to face the consequence. "Don't worry, my sweet Danny. I am not going to kill you. You are something special. And I know that you won't kill me now that you know who I am. All those nights you laid awake hearing me call out for you, telling you stories. You would dream of me, waiting for me to rescue you from the hell that you were living in." Before I could respond, he was gone. I bent over and threw up, and thankfully my stomach was empty. After a few minutes, I went to the diner. I needed my coffee and to figure out what the hell just happened. Chapter 2. After 3 cups of coffee and 2 hours later, I didn't see anything in the shadows that were around the buildings. Glancing at my watch, the sun was about to rise. I could go home and take a hot shower, climb into bed, and fall asleep. I knew tonight I was going to have to meet with the elders, as they called themselves. I was going to have to tell them about this man. I just hoped they didn't kick me out of the group. I finally found my place. As the sun started to rise, I paid my bill and headed to my place. It wasn't the best apartment, but it was mine, and that was all I needed. After I left home, I was grateful to have my own place where no one could yell at me. My parents, if you could call them that, would always yell at me for something. Most times I would just stay in my room when I wasn't at school. School was a safe haven for me. I kept to myself and no one bothered me. There were whispers about me, but I didn't care. My apartment was in a rundown building, but I had heat and water and there was roof over my head. I considered myself lucky since a lot of people in this town didn't even have that much. Shutting and locking the door behind me, I put my keys on the side table that I kept near the door, along with my cell phone and wallet. I took a hot shower, put on my nightshirt, and climbed into bed. I set my alarm, and I was asleep by the time my head hit the pillow. I woke up to my alarm buzzing, my hand hit the button, and I rolled over. Laying there, I was dreading this meeting. Somehow, they knew when one of us messed up and didn't get our kill. They would grill you over what you did wrong, and I wasn't looking forward to that. Since this was the first time I messed up, maybe they won't be so hard on me. I hoped. I got up and went to start my coffee pot. I took another shower, braided my hair, put on a pair of black jeans, a black shirt, a black sweatshirt that was too big on me. Put on my boots that were steel-toed. I put 2 of my knives on the insides of my boots. I looked myself over and decided everything was perfect. My coffee pot let me know it was done. I had an hour before I had to leave. I poured myself a cup of coffee and ate a bowl of cereal. Only meal I was going to be able to eat for the next 6 hours. I grabbed my cell and checked it for messages. There were 2. I opened the first one. Danny, you will meet us at 10 tonight at the diner. Tom. I blew out a breath. Great. At least it was at the diner. I glanced at my watch, and it was only 8 p.m. I still had some time to steady myself. I opened the next text. Danny, my sweet Danny, it was such a pleasure to finally be next to you, touching your warm skin and inhaling your beautiful scent. I look forward to seeing more of you. Ryan. I sat there reading and rereading that last message. How in the hell did he get my number? Turning off the coffee pot, I grabbed my stuff and headed towards the diner. The diner was only 2 blocks from my apartment, which gave me plenty of time to go over my head what I was going to say. Once inside, I saw Tom and Lisa sitting in my booth. I took a breath and slowly let it out. Glanced at the clock on the wall, and it was 8:30. They're a half hour early. This can't be good. Sitting down, I smiled when I looked over at them, and they didn't smile back. Chapter 3. Danny, Tom said in his monotone voice. Tom, I said back, but in a nicer tone. I didn't want to give them any more ammunition to get rid of me than what they already have. Do you know why we call this meeting? Lisa asked. This woman was as strict as they come. She never cracked a smile, never had a pleasant tone to her voice. Her black eyes were always cold. and she had black hair that was always in a bun. I have a few ideas, but not concrete ones, I said, sitting back. She narrowed her eyes at me. I looked back at her and smiled. I knew she hated people being nice, and well, I had a habit of making sure to always be extra nice to her. Danny, why didn't you take care of that vampire last night? Tom asked quietly. I lost him, and I made a stupid, almost fatal move when I closed my eyes to regroup, I said, looking only at Tom. Tom knew all about my nightmares and night terrors growing up. I had also told him of a man's voice that I heard growing up. Nothing creepy, just telling me stories of a time gone by. To a child, one would think they were fairy tales, ones to scare away the darkness. But as I grew older, the stories would change. As I became an adult, they would become ones of lost lovers finding each other. That voice was there every night, keeping me safe. So you finally met the man behind the voice? Tom asked, looking at me. I nodded, looking down at my hands that were crossed over each other. What man? What voice? Lisa asked, looking between Tom and myself. Tom turns toward Lisa and sighed. I kept this from you, Lisa, but Danny told me things before she was brought into this group. Ever since she was a small child, a certain vampire has been protecting her, keeping her safe at night as she grew up. Until last night, he stayed in the dark, away from her. Last night, it was him that she was hunting. He confronted her when he knew she was at a moment of weakness. Tom said, glancing at me from time to time as he told Lisa my story. I should have been informed of this, Lisa said, turning to look at me. This is unacceptable, Lisa said in a voice that was ice cold. I blew out the breath that I was holding. Here it comes. Danny, you are off the streets until further notice, Lisa said. Tom turned and looked at her. That is not happening. Danny is one of the best hunters, and she will be out there. She told me from the start what was going on with her, and I alone kept it from you, not her. So you will not take her off the streets, Tom said in a stern tone. Lisa sat there blinking a few times, her mouth opening and closing. She sat there, setting her jaw and narrowing her eyes at me. Great, now she really has it in for me, I thought. Why is it so important about you, Danny, that a vampire would watch a child grow up and keep her safe? Lisa asked. I shrugged my shoulders. I have no idea, Lisa, I said, looking back at her. In truth, I really had no idea why this man did what he did. This man is one that we have been searching for years for, Tom said quietly to Lisa. She sat there looking at me, and then turned to Tom. Are you certain? She asked. Tom nodded his head, and they both turned to look at me. What? I asked. She has no idea, does she? Lisa asked in amazement. No, was all Tom said, and that tone meant not to ask any questions. The waitress came over and we ordered. A few minutes went by and the waitress came back with our food and drinks. I sat there eating a hamburger and fries. I would glance at Tom and Lisa from time to time. They sat there enjoying their food. After we were done, Tom sat back and looked at me for a moment. Danny, I want you back out there, and I want you to see if you can find him again. If not, go about your usual business and let him come to you, Tom said as he was getting ready to stand up. What do I do if I see him? I asked. Nothing, Tom said as he left to pay the bill. I looked at Lisa, which wasn't the smartest thing to do. Her eyes were narrowed at me. I don't know why Tom is wanting to keep you with this group. Yes, your skills are the top of the board, but this is dangerous. This vampire is dangerous. We have been hunting him for years, and he has never once come to any of us like he did you, she said as she went to stand up. Lisa turned around and looked at me. You will either be our saving grace or our biggest threat, she said as she left the table. I was left alone. I watched Tom and Lisa get into their car and drive off. Great. Now I didn't want to go out. All I wanted to do now was go home, put on something comfortable, and watch movies. I went to use the bathroom, taking a moment to look at myself in the mirror. I didn't see anything special, just a normal girl looking back at me. As I left the bathroom, I saw someone sitting at my booth. As I got closer, I saw it was him. My heart rate sped up. He turned his head slightly towards me. I got to my booth and sat down across from this man. We sat there looking at each other. Before you freak out, I'm not here to hurt you, Danny. In fact, I'm here to protect you. You have no idea what you are, do you? He asked. His voice was smooth and deep. My body reacted to his voice. His head slightly tilted to the side, and he smiled at me. I'm nothing special, I said quietly, not trusting my own voice. Oh, but Danny, you are more than just nothing, and you are quite special. In time, you will see, and you will see where you belong, he said. Where do I belong? I asked. He smiled and got up, walked over to me, and leaned down near my ear. With me, he said, and walked out of the diner.